Welcome, everyone. This interview is part of the New York State Lawyers Response to the Pandemic Project, organized by the Historical Society of the New York Courts. This initiative is intended to create a platform for New York State attorneys to share their experiences on practicing law during the COVID-19 pandemic. Today is August 13th, 2021. It's a Friday, thus the casual attire. My name is David L. Goodwin, and I'm a staff attorney with Appellate Advocates in Manhattan. And I'm joined by Andrew Gerst, who is at Mobilization for Justice. This is a follow-up interview from July 2020, over a year ago, which is amazing. And so we're going to discuss what's been going on since then. Reopenings, what's changed, what hasn't, that sort of thing. Thank you so much, Andrew, for being willing to join us again.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So let's, I think, look at this narrow and then into broad. So we're about a year after you and I last spoke over this video machine thingy. What has changed at Mobilization for Justice vis-a-vis COVID in that time, recognizing that you are part of a very narrow part of Mobilization for Justice?
I think that the biggest change probably is that, for better or for worse, we have gotten used to all the changes that the pandemic has wrought upon us. So for instance, I think, work from home was very challenging for a lot of us at first, and we've kind of made that adjustment. For instance, I have not even met many of the clients that I have gained in the last year ever in person. I've only spoken with them over the phone, and that has become somewhat normal. We've done plenty of hearings over the phone. We know, what things to watch out for and what things go well. And I would say, yeah, we've been able to keep business running pretty smoothly at MFJ overall.
Let's take a step back for a second. So remind the audience, such as it exists, what it is you practice in, and then what Mobilization for Justice also dabbles in.
Sure. So, well, maybe I'll do it in the reverse order. So MFJ is a legal services organization. We work with low-income individuals across all 5 boroughs of New York City, helping them with a variety of different civil legal needs, housing, immigration, kinship care, things like that. I am in the special education unit. So our work focuses almost exclusively on helping students with disabilities and their rights under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So most of what we do is we file due process complaints against the New York City Department of Education. We go to IEP meetings, and we do some policy work as well.
So with regard to Mobilization for Justice writ large, do you have a sense of how court reopenings are proceeding across all of those divisions in addition to yours?
To be honest, I have very little insight into what's going on in the other units. My understanding is I think housing court was closed for a very long time. There's a moratorium on evictions. I think there are still cases that are pending that some were filed prior to the commencement of the pandemic. And I think some landlords have tried to get around that moratorium through other kinds of cases. So we are still getting some housing work. I think other venues have transitioned to remote hearings. I know someone, I believe in the bankruptcy project, had a federal court hearing over Zoom or over the phone recently. So I do think most units have at least transitioned somewhat to remote hearings.
So before we dig a little deeper into the actual court side of things, I noticed I am in my splendid office today. You are, I think, more or less where you were last time we spoke. Has the Mobilization for Justice office actually reopened at this point?
Yes, it has. And I think there are a small number of people who have been going in every week, somewhere in the order of 5 to 10 people is what I'm told. I should say there are 2 offices, one in Manhattan and one in the Bronx. I'm based in the Manhattan office, so I know that office better. I'm not sure what's happening in the Bronx. But the vast majority of people, I believe, are still working from home pretty much every day, myself included.
Is there a plan to transition out of that, or is this the beginning of a new kind of hybrid work from home, work in the office style that the organization will pursue?
I will say maybe yes to both. In that, so right now the plan is for the office to gradually phase in a reopening. We are told in October, I believe, we are instructed to work in the office 1 day a week. Starting in November, that'll be 2 days a week. December will be 3 days a week, and January will max out at 4 days a week. So we will always have at least one remote day forever. That being said, I would not be surprised if our office revisits this in the next few months, especially there is a lot of concern, understandably, about the Delta variant. I would not be surprised if we ended up having a more flexible work from home policy at some point in the future.
And so for anyone watching this from the future, who has forgotten about the timeline of this, I think if you and I, Andrew, had discussed reopening plans even a month ago, it probably would have been a lot more optimistic. But currently, as you mentioned, we're in the grips of the Delta variant, which has caused everyone to kind of scramble their plans. Was that October date the product of something being scrambled, or was that set way back when?
No, it was set way back when, probably at least 2 months ago. And I don't know what's going to happen with that.
So let's focus then on the actual experience of practice that you've been undergoing right now. So how have things changed since you and I last spoke, if they've changed?
I would say, for better or for worse, things have not changed very much. All of our hearings are still on the phone, which has, in my opinion, a lot of advantages and a small number of disadvantages. I guess some changes are that there are a large number of new hearing officers who recently began. I'm not sure that that's related to the pandemic, but many of them have a different style, if you will, than some of the older hearing officers. So that has been a little bit of an adjustment. Other than that, I would say there really hasn't been a lot of change in what we do.
Is there any suggestion that at some point those impartial hearings will be back in person?
Great question. I have not heard anything about that. I have heard there may be some hearings that are transitioning from phone to video, which I do think would be a good change. However, as of today, I still only have phone hearings.
Now, you mentioned earlier that the phone format has a lot of advantages and also some disadvantages. Would you mind talking about what those are as compared with how the hearings normally work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest advantage is just the convenience. Many of our clients almost all of our clients are low-income people who are traveling, sometimes an hour or two on the subway to get to the one hearing office, which is in downtown Brooklyn. If you live in the Bronx or, farther out in Brooklyn or Queens or Staten Island, it's not going to be convenient for you. So having a phone hearing is infinitely better for the vast majority of people. And of course, it's nice for us, the attorneys and the hearing officers, to also not be required to travel. It does save a lot of paper. We're not printing out hundreds and hundreds of pages of evidence. We're just emailing PDFs to hearing officers. So I think those are good changes. I would say the biggest drawback relates to language interpretation and translation. It is much easier to provide live language interpretation in person, where a translator can sit next to a client who does not speak English and kind of quietly simultaneously translate as the hearing officer is talking. Obviously, over the phone, that's not possible. So instead, hearings with translation can take almost twice as long because every word that's spoken in English then has to be spoken in Spanish or another language.
Do you get the sense that some of the things you've identified, in particular the lack of need to print out thousands of pages of evidence, might end up being persistent even once COVID is over?
I hope so. It's hard to say. Some of the hearing officers are on the older side and may not be the most tech savvy. And I could see some of them wanting to go back to those, days of paper. And for all I know, maybe they're printing them out at home anyway. But I do think at least, some of the younger hearing officers will be okay with that. And some perhaps it'll be up to the discretion of the hearing officer.
I assume hearing requests are no longer filed by fax.
Oh, no. Even prior to the pandemic, everything was by email.
That is an amazing change. I thought
Yes.
that day would never come. So to the extent and I realize this can be a touchy subject, so if it is, we don't need to focus on it, but what has Mobilization for Justice's position, and also, I guess, the impartial hearing side of things, to the extent been with regard to vaccinations? To keep everyone up to date as to where we are in space and time, vaccinations are a thing. They were not a thing when you and I last spoke, but like everything else in the world, it's gotten complicated. So what's the current thought on the ground with regard to vaccinations in your office?
Sure. So your timing is great. We just received an email at 3 p.m. today with new instructions on vaccination. So
I made that happen, Andrew.
I'm impressed. I'm not surprised. So yeah, the current plan is because MFJ is a city contractor, we have to follow policies set by New York City. And my understanding is they are requiring every employee either to show proof of vaccination or to undergo weekly testing. And so right now we've been told that if we have been vaccinated, we need to upload our vaccination card or provide another proof of vaccination, I believe by I think mid or early September. They haven't given more information on people who do weekly testing, but I assume there will be more concrete guidelines on that as well.
Do you know whether your office is accepting the Excelsior Pass?
Yes, they are, absolutely. And I think they even said that's preferred over the paper copy of immunization, which is what I used.
I mean, that's good to hear. And I think that we've, like a lot of organizations, I think have been evolving in that direction. Ours might be taking similar steps too, if we haven't already. Way back when, minutes upon minutes ago, you mentioned that there are a lot of clients who you've been assigned who you haven't even met. Have you had any opportunities for in-person client interactions during this period? And if no, is that something you're looking forward to getting back to?
I would say, again, it sort of it depends. The office varied. In one point, it was closed, then was open again, but there were very strict rules on who could and couldn't be there and sign-in sheets and things like that. So I think if there were a situation where I felt it was crucial to meet in person with the client, that would have been feasible probably in the last 6 or 8 months or so. I have not chosen to do that. Fortunately, we haven't needed to do that. That being said, you're right. I do miss the in-person, communication with clients very much. That is the one thing that I really hope does return. I'm a little pessimistic, to be honest, that will return. I think a lot of people are going to remain cautious for quite a months or years until we really figure out what to do next in terms of ensuring everyone's safety.
And from a purely practical perspective, is there anything that you found you can't do in virtual interactions, phone interactions, that you could do in in-person client interactions?
Sure. Well, the simplest example is during a hearing, being able to have a little side conversation with your client is very helpful. Occasionally, a client may say something which would not be advisable, and it can be hard to stop them from doing so over the phone. So I do miss that. I think also more importantly, just building trust in general can be a challenge. I've been lucky. I think our clients have been great, and we've worked very well together. But I think it's always best if you can just really get to know a person face to face in person.
Do you get a sense where your adversary, the Department of Education, is in this series of events right now? Like, are they doing everything remotely? Do you get the sense they're back in the office? What's been going on their side of the ledger to the extent you know?
I don't have very good information on this, but my suspicion is that they are working remotely almost entirely still. And I would not be surprised if they continued to work remotely even in the fall. Again, if all of the hearings are over the phone, there's really no point in them working in person at the hearing office. So I would expect this to continue for a while.
So, Andrew, in casting your memory back to July 2020 and thinking about, the year that has passed between now and then, are there any other topics that you think we should cover? Anything that surprised you in how the way the world has changed or how it isn't changed? And any aspects of your job and legal practice that have, been particularly revelatory in the interim?
Yeah, so I forget where in last summer we were when we did the interview, but I think the most obvious example would be, the protests in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. I think last summer we saw a lot of really heartfelt activism for Black Lives Matter across the country. And that certainly has been a big part of our conversations at MFJ for the last year. We actually conducted a DEI/AR audit, and we had a consultant meet with our entire staff, I think 5 times. We had a lot of tough conversations about the diversity of the office and how we can do things better. To be honest, I think that's still very much a work in progress for us, just like many other organizations. But it is certainly a component that we think about. During our weekly intake meetings, we talk about racial justice and how it affects our clients. And special education work we do. And I would expect that to continue as well, which is great.
And it really goes to show you that while we focus very much on COVID in these discussions, so much has been going on in the world at the same time that it's very hard to separate out the different strands when we talk about how much has changed and what the practice of law is going to be like going forward. Thank you so much, Andrew, for taking the time to follow up with the prior interview today. It's been delightful to be able to pick your brain about this topic again. And for anyone who is watching, thank you so much for tuning into this interview. Again, it's part of the New York State Lawyers' Response to the Pandemic Project, which is organized by the Historical Society of the New York Courts. You can find out more information about both this project and the Society at greater length by going to our website at history.nycourts.gov. That's history.nycourts.gov. I'm David Goodwin, a trustee of the Society, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.